Last episode, I mentioned about how to improve some of the scenes in Jillian's project. Here, I'm going to show you how to make it better using Blender 3D. By the way, we are offering online learning in Maya and Blender if you are interested to learn animation. It really depends on what you want to focus on and what you need and expect after you're done with all the lessons. Learning either one of the 3D software is not really that important, as long as you learn the basic principles and get the idea on how things work in 3D. Because if you have done all these things and decide later on to focus on another 3D program, it's not difficult for you to transition to it. Besides, most of the tools being used by other 3D programs are using almost the same process when creating things in 3D. If you are already good enough, I think it will just take you a few days to learn another 3D program. Don't expect to learn everything at once, take it a step at a time. I myself am still learning until now. So focus on important things first, especially when learning a new 3D program. From time to time, I will be making video tutorials for you to get a bit of understanding and learn some important things in 3D. So subscribe and get updated. Let's start. By default, we get a cube inside the Blender 3D viewport. Since we are going to make a table first, then this cube is going to be a good geometry to start modeling. This might look familiar to most of you who knows how to model. I'm just adding more detail to the cube right now. So what I'm trying to do is to show you how to fix texture distortions that you might encounter with your modeled objects. This will be applicable to any 3D program you are currently using. So I'm just subdividing using the loop cut tool. In Maya, we have the insert edge loop tool. When selecting and moving vertices in Blender, we have to make sure that we are in the wireframe mode to select the vertices underneath. As you saw, the first selection I did, I was not able to move the vertices below it. So with the wireframe mode, I was able to move and scale these vertices so I can position them as seen here. I am not doing any precision movements. I am just eyeballing and estimating for this example I'm doing. I'm adding more edges so I can get enough resolution to extrude out the legs of the table. It's important that you plan ahead on what you need to do with your models. Don't place too much detail or you might end up moving and editing a lot of things, which will make your work slower. So we extrude the legs now, and once we are done, we move on to UV editing. It's also important that we create good UV layout so that it will not be difficult to place and align the textures. Here I'm going to unwrap using the Smart UV project. It is similar to Maya's automatic mapping. I'm just using the default value and that's it. It will try to flatten every UV so we get it flat on the surface. I can also do texture painting here in Blender, which is really nice, but this feature is also found in other 3D softwares. For now, we are just going to apply an image texture, so we go to Shading tab and apply it there. We have already a default shading node since we have only one object. We have multiple objects, then we have to create shading nodes for each. I will discuss more of this in the next episodes. So I go to base color and select import texture. Click open to browse on the texture to apply it. So we have now that wood texture applied on the table. I will just focus on the surface of the table just to show you how to fix the texture distortion that will happen later on. Going back to the layout tab, I'm switching the viewport shading on so we see the texture in this view. We can choose from material preview or just rendered just for checking everything. So right now I want to change how the texture is being distributed on the surface of the table. Since the texture is tileable, I need to increase the tiling so I can change how it looks. To do that, I go back to shading. Then I go to vector and apply a mapping. And then this vector here, I apply a UV texture coordinate. Then I increase the scale in Y so we get this texture shape. Now let's add a modifier and apply a subdivision surface. And increase the resolution in the viewport around 4. So we can see a smooth preview of the subdivided mesh. As you can see, the edge of this table looks a little distorted, but not that noticeable. With the topology and mesh resolution we have right now, it's not enough to hold the hard edge which we need to retain since we have applied a subdivision surface. With it, it also affected the distribution of our texture. Usually when the texture is closer to the edge, this happens. I'm going to increase the tiling a bit just for us to see properly the distortion of the texture. Okay, so what we need to do now to fix this is just to add more resolution, inserting edges to areas where it needs to hold it in place to maintain the hard edge. In doing so, it also adds more detail on the UV which is responsible for holding the textures. Again, I'm just going to concentrate on the surface of the table to fix the distortion of the texture. We can see here the low poly cage and the smooth version of the mesh. So all we have to do is just insert a loop on this side, the one above, and then the one below. And then we are going to do that as well on the top portion, same thing. Just insert the loop closer to the edge of the table, and also on this side we need to place it also. See, you have already a good looking texture, but we have to maintain also the hard edge on this side of the table. I'm also adding resolution on the legs of the table to hold it in place. And now we can see that we have a cleaner texture on this side of the table. But we still have a problem. This side is now showing a noticeable texture distortion. So what we need to do again is just to add an edge loop to fix this distortion. Now we have a clean distribution of the texture, and we fixed the texture distortion. The next tutorial is about glass and its refraction, and I will also discuss how a glass object that has thickness and one without reacts to light. So we start first with the plane. Select the vertices and merge the vertices to center. Just click the Y gizmo here so we can draw it flat on this view. Use the extrude tool to shape it like a bottle. Make sure to drag and move from the outer ring and not the inner ring of this tool, or it will not create a new vertex point. After shaping, we select all the vertices and use the spin tool. So the spin is actually spinning from the origin. We can actually change it anywhere we want, but this is where we want it to be. This is actually like Maya's revolve tool also. We close it by setting it at a 360 angle. Now we have a potion bottle. Let's set this aside and model another one with thickness. I'm creating a plane again. You don't have to rotate this actually. I'm just doing this just to show it facing the camera. We merge the vertices again and use the extrude tool to shape it. But this time, let's try to model it with thickness. We readjust the vertices, and by the way, we should maintain the number of vertices in the inner and outer surface so we have clean geometry. we apply the spin tool again and close it. Here we have one bottle with thickness and one without. Let's apply a modifier and choose subdivision surface. We set the viewport resolution to 4 so we get a smoother surface preview in our viewport, and I'm applying it to the other one as well. We create a plane for the ground, so we can use this to bounce our light later on. I'm just positioning this so it doesn't interpenetrate. Now we go to the shading and apply the materials. I'm selecting this plane and clicking new so that we apply a new shader to it. We click this icon here, which is the same as this panel over here. I'm just going to change the color of this plane so we have contrast between the bottles and this plane. Select the bottle and apply a new shader. Since this is going to be a glass material, all we have to do is apply a glass preset. Alternatively, we can actually just use the default principled BSDF and just increase the transmission and lower the roughness value. And there we go, we have glass. I'm doing the same thing with this other bottle also. You can see here that we have a default reflection already, but we can change that later and apply another background image and use that for our new reflection image. Going back to the layout tab, I'm going to switch on viewport shading and I'm going to change the render engine to cycles. It's not yet looking good. We still need to set up a good environment image to give us good reflection and additional lighting. I'm just going to use our default point light for our lighting together with the environment lighting. I'm going to click this icon here so we can change the color background to an image texture. So then we click this button here for that color option and choose the correct node. If we use image texture, then this is how it will look like. So we go back to color and reassign an environment texture instead. There we go. We have the environment reflection and additional environment lighting for our scene. Now let's fix our glass shaders because our refraction is not giving us good result. This first one has too much refraction. I'll reduce its index of refraction to around 1.2. Now that looks better. I'll apply it to the other one also. So just play around with your index of refraction value until you get a better result. As long as you get the refraction not to distort too much, then you are on the right path. So I think we need to reduce more of the refraction. Let's reduce it to around 1.13. Okay, that's good. And also we need to reduce the other one, maybe reduce it more. Maybe this one will make it 1.12. Okay, that's better. Here you can see the big difference between the one with thickness and the one without. With the right settings for index of refraction, you should be able to make it appear more realistic. Light travels and is bent through different surfaces. When we model objects, we usually end up with a surface that is flat. Depending on what it is intended for, it is really not necessary to give thickness to objects because you might end up with a really high resolution geometry, especially when applying subdivision to it. So I suggest that you apply this to glass objects, transparent or semi-transparent objects. I'm increasing the background lighting strength so we can brighten up the scene. Then from camera, select active camera to frame the scene for final render. I'm just moving the camera position here to get good framing. We can move our viewport camera to see our active camera and then readjust manually. So if we get the right framing estimate, then we go back to our active camera and then readjust. Then from render menu, click render image. You can see that we have this kind of low-res render. That's because we are only setting up the render to look good in the viewport for the subdivision modifier that we applied, and not for the final render. Let's go back to our modifier and also increase the quality to around 4 for our final render. And there we go. I think we still need to increase it more. Nice. Okay, we still need to clean up the noise on our final render. To fix this, all we have to do is go to sampling, increase the render quality maybe around 600 or 800 depending on how fast your system can handle it. The bigger the value, the better, but your render time would suffer. One alternative way to make this faster is by using Eevee as our render engine. It's faster and you still get good results. I will be making another video on this, but for now, this is what we need to focus on. That's all for now. I hope that you've learned something from this. I hope I explained it well. I apologize for some inconsistencies of this video that I think you know already, and see you next time.